Hey guys, this is Mr. Grice for Algebra Unit 9.4 Notes. Today we're going to be talking about graphing square root functions. Our learning target today is to be able to graph square root functions that involve shifts and reflections. So here's our little reminder. A parent function, once again, is a common function in its basic form. So yesterday we talked about a quadratic, which was f of x equals x squared. That was the parent function, okay? The most common. Today, we're going to be talking about square roots. And the square root is the f of x equals the square root of x. All right. And then tomorrow, next time we do a video, we're going to be talking about the absolute value of x equation, okay? So today, all we're talking about is this guy. But what we're learning today is very similar to what we learned yesterday. So the parent function, we have to find out what those values are, okay? This is something that you should memorize, okay? I'm going to write it right down here so you remember to memorize it, okay? So to figure this out, we're going to need to plug it in. So for the first one, I don't know if your guys is filled out or not. Mine isn't, so we're going to fill it out. So remember, you'd be plugging f of 0. So what's the square root of 0? Well, the square root of 0 is 0. Then we would do the square root of 1. The square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. Okay? And I think this part is already filled out where it's we start off at 0, 0, 1, 1, and then 4, 2. So our graph looks like that. So one of the things that we need to do, blah, 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 is to figure out what our pattern is. So what's the first problem or the first step? What do we do from one point to the other? Okay, that was up 1, and then we went right 1. So up 1, right 1. And then for the second step, we go up 1, right 3. Okay, so that was 1, 2, 3. That part you need to memorize. Up 1, right 1, up 1, right 3. Okay? That's very important. That's the main thing I want you to memorize. Okay? We're always going to be moving to the right when we're talking about a square root graph. Okay? Now, let's compare the transformed function on the right to the parent function. So, the first thing I want to know, was it reflected? What do you think? Is our graph a mirror image? Yeah, it was, okay. So that means that it is reflected. And guess what? See the negative? That negative means that it's reflected, just like in the quadratics. All right, now let's talk about horizontally. We start in the center, but we moved how many spots to the left? We went 2, okay? So we went left 2. And that's important because look at, see how it's plus 2? It's the same thing as a quadratic. How we moved, we do the opposite. We go left 2. All right. And the last one, vertical. What did we do? Up or down? We went up 1. Okay. And guys, just hopefully you're assuming this, that last part, that plus 1 is telling us to go up. Okay. Now, the only thing that we really need to pay attention to, since this is a reflection, what did we do? What was our pattern? We went down 1, right 1, and then we go down 1, right 3. Okay, so once again, this is that other pattern that we need to memorize, and this is when it's reflected. We either go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 3, or we go down 1, right 1, down 1, right 3. That's the same. Okay, so here we go. The first thing we always care about is the initial point. Okay, in the quadratic, we call that the vertex. That's the same thing. It's the h comma k. So what's in underneath the square root and then what's outside of the square root, the h and the k. All right. Out front, the a, if it's a positive, no reflection. If it's negative, we have a reflection. All right. That h tells us the horizontal shift. Okay, and remember that's from 0, 0. So are we moving right or are we moving left? Same as yesterday. And then the k, the vertical shift, once again, that's from 0, 0. Do we go up or do we go down? Okay, so if you need to keep copying that, go ahead and pause the video. Otherwise, I want to talk about these right here. So we're going to compare the given function to its parent function, f of x equals to the square root of x, by describing any shifts or reflections. Then identify the vertex of the function. So for number 1, is there a reflection over the x-axis? Yes or no? Well, what do you think? Okay, the reflection, is it positive or negative? Well, it's positive, so that means no. So our initial point, we get that from the 5 and the 2. So my 5 is positive. I want the opposite of that, so it's negative 5, and then negative 2. Our horizontal shift, we get that from the x value. That's our x. So this is telling us that we need to go left 5. And then our vertical shift we get from that y. So this is telling us that we need to go down 2. Okay. What about number 2? Is there a reflection? You bet there is. Okay. So our initial point is going to be what? Positive 1, positive 8. Okay. And once again, we're getting that from the 8 and the negative 1. So our horizontal shift from left to right, since it's a positive 1, we're going to go right 1. And the vertical shift, we're going to go up 8. Okay. Number 3. Go ahead and try 3 on your own. Okay, what'd you get for the reflection? It's negative, right? So that means yes. Now, the initial point. Excuse me, I had to sneeze real quick. But anyways, the initial point, what did you guys get? Well, I got the point 0, 6, okay? Because underneath the square root, if there is nothing there, is there anything underneath that square root? Well, no. So if there's nothing there, it's a 0. Okay, and then the plus 6, that's our y. So since 0 is our x, that means that there is none, no shift for horizontal. And for the vertical shift, we are going to go up 6. Okay, so that's pretty much the same as quadratics. Let's go ahead and flip it over. Now we're going to have to graph the function, identify the shifts, and then say what the domain and range are. Okay, so let's see if you can get all of the parts on the left. Those 4. Okay, pause the video. Good luck. Okay, so is there a reflection? No. Our initial point is -3, -4. And for the shift, we would go left 3 and down 4. So the next part now is to graph it. So I'm going to start this at -3, -4, and now I'm going to follow my pattern. Okay, I go up 1, over 1, or up 1, right 1, and up 1, right 3. Okay, and then we're going to draw the line. So the next thing we need to talk about is the domain. And remember, the domain is from left to right. What happens? Is there a specific starting point? Well, yeah, it's at -3. Okay. So since there's a specific starting point, we have to make sure we write that. So we're talking about x. Now, is x greater than -3 or is it less than -3? Well, the values keep going to the right, which means that is greater. So x is greater than or equal to -3. And something that I'd like to point out, see how we're using the same numbers as our initial point? Good, I hope so. All right, next, let's talk about the range. Okay, the range is our y going up and down vertically, okay? There is a specific starting point, okay? And that's right here. It doesn't go lower than that point, which is -4, okay? So we're talking about y. Y is greater than or equal to -4, okay? And pay attention, the -4, hey, guess what? That was in our initial point, okay? Now, find the value of f of 1. So I want to know when we plug in 1, what do we get? And if you look, you just go down, it's right there, we get the point 2. So f of 1 equals 2, and that is a -2. Okay? Let's move on to number 5. Okay? We'll go through and do these together. Is there a reflection? Yeah, of course there is. That's what that negative symbol out front means. Our initial point is going to be 6, 4, which tells me that we are going to go right 6, up 4. Okay? So let's graph that. I'm starting at 6, 4, and there's a reflection. That means I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to go down 1, right 1, down 1, right 3. Okay? Don't forget that. And then we're going to graph. And now let's talk about the domain and range. Okay? Domain is our x. There's a specific starting point. Okay? And that's at the point 6. And x is greater than or equal to 6. Okay? And now the range, and just remember that we get that 6 from right there, our initial point. Same thing's going to happen with our range. Okay? That's going to be a 4. But now when we're looking at that starting point, because now we're talking vertical, was it greater than 4 or was it less than 4? It was less. So y is less than or equal to positive 4. Okay? Now, when we plug in the point 7, there's 5, 6, 7. What do we get? That's the point 3. Okay? So when you plug in f of 7, y equals 3. Okay, number 6. Why don't you guys see if you can answer the questions and graph it, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. Go ahead and pause that video. Okay, that's going to be the first information that I give you. Okay, might be like, Mr. Grice, how do we know that it was negative 4, 0? There's nothing behind the square root. We're really adding 0. Okay, so that's how we know that that's 0. Okay. All right, actually, I should highlight that in pink because that's what we did for that point. Anyways, let's go ahead and graph. So negative 4, 0. And then there's no reflection, so it's up 1, right 1, up 1, right 3. You guys doing good so far? Well, let's see. The domain x is greater than or equal to negative 4. Okay, remember we get the negative 4, and that's our range, or our domain, I'm sorry. Y, there's no reflection. Y is greater than or equal to 0. Okay? And when we plug in 0, f of 0, our point is 0, comma, positive 2. So we get 2. All right. Number 7, you guys are all on your own. Pause the video. Good luck. Okay, and there are the answers. Now, just remember, with our initial point, that helps us with our domain, and that helps us with our range. And for the range, we have to pay attention. If there's a reflection, it's less than the range. Look at number 6. There was no reflection, it was greater. Okay? You can tell that just by one, looking at your graph, or just kind of memorizing that. Now, if you have any questions, you need to come see Ms. Carranza or myself. We would love to help you out. That's our job. Your homework is the 9.4 practice. All right? Well, guys, this is Mr. Grice signing off for Algebra 1 Unit 9.4 notes. As always, if you need us, come find us. Thanks for watching.